Hello and welcome everybody to the Merryoaks Property Finance Development Fundamentals. Can you hear me? How can I get a confirmation that everyone can hear me? There you go. There's Craig. How you doing, Craig? Good to see you, sir. Good. And we've got a little chat box here. Yes, we can hear you. Can hear you. Good. Alan and Corey. All right, lovely. So I appreciate you all joining me this evening. I wanted to share some insights into the world of property development finance, how it works, and how you can utilize it to help you grow your property development business. So we're going to go on a whistle-stop tour for the next 60 minutes or so. I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff that we've been working on, as well as a few structures and concepts. And then there'll be a session at the end where we can talk about the deals that you might be working on, discuss any questions, queries, concerns you might have on stuff that you're looking at, and then we go from there. So without further ado, I will get this party started. So a little bit about me very quickly. Now, I don't want to do a sob story about how hard my life's been or anything to that effect. But it's always good to know a little bit about who is the person behind, who's the person telling you about all this stuff. I've been in property for over 20 years, started out as an estate agent. I quickly became an investor, developer, landlord. I always wanted to be in property. I grew up in the northeast of England, in Durham, and I had a best friend. His dad was a big property mogul up in the northeast, and I decided I just wanted to be in property. I wanted to be a property developer. I wanted to be an estate agent, because he had a chain of estate agencies. And when I hit London to study business at university, it was my parents that encouraged me to get a job. They said nobody wants a business graduate with no work experience, so make sure you get a job. And that's literally what I did. I had my GCSEs and A levels, and I went around all the estate agents in my local area handing out CVs. Nobody would give me a job initially until I wrote on the bottom, PS in pencil, I will work for free. Then suddenly my little Nokia phone started ringing off the hook. And I chose the biggest office in Walthamstow in northeast London to become an estate agent. And it was free for 3 months. I'd work Friday, Saturdays, and Mondays. And then anybody who was off, anybody who was sick, I used to not go to my lectures, and I used to go to the office and do estate agency sales and lettings. And it was an interesting experience. So at first it was just getting teas, coffees, lunches. This was a time that no computers were on desks, applicant cards, and we were stapling property lists together. And then slowly but surely they'd allow me to answer the phone and take applicants' details, arrange viewings, conduct viewings, then negotiate offers. And away I went. I saved up a bunch of money and I bought my first property. I saved up £10,000, just shy of. And my old man said, no, don't spend it all as I wanted to with my friends. He said, either give it to your mum or go buy a property. So I didn't want to give it to my mum because I thought that was quite boring. And I ended up buying a property. I spoke to my manager at the time. So this is before Rightmove and Zoopla. So getting good deals were pretty much through valuers and branch managers. And I asked him, I told him I wanted to buy something. And this was a time as well, self-set mortgages were around. I bought a £100,000 flat in Walthamstow, spent 10,000 on the refurb, and I flipped it. I had £20,000 in my bank account within 6 months, and I was absolutely hooked since then. So I continued to do that over the next 8 years or so, and it was great. We started doing lots of internal refurbs. My old man brought some cash down from the northeast, so we started doing it together as a family. And I would be the guy on the ground in London. And there were refurbs and side extensions and rear extensions and loft conversions and then houses into flats. And it was a great time. The market was going great guns. and I thought it was going to last forever, but lo and behold, 2008 came round. It was the credit crisis, and the party stopped. The music stopped, and it was all over. The prices started to creep down. Those self-cert mortgages weren't available anymore, and we held on to a bunch of properties in North and East London. And some of those properties have done really well over the last 20 years. Some of them have gone up to 6 times in value. So buying them are literally 100, 150, 200,000 pounds, and they're now worth in excess of 700,000. So buying and holding as a portfolio over the long term has done me very well. And since 2015, I decided to refinance some of that portfolio, which was all paid off by 2015, and to go again. So we ended up buying more high-yielding income-producing assets in Kent, the West Midlands, and back up in the northeast, in and around Middlesbrough. So that's the Whistle Stop tour up until about 2017, where I was a founding member of a lending business. This was development finance, ticket sizes between 3 and 30 million. We funded SME property investors and developers across the UK, funded over 1,000 homes. Before I stepped down from my position there, I was a founding member, and I set up Merryoaks Property Finance. Development finance is great. It's something that I know intrinsically, having been in the credit department, having built the credit department from scratch. But I do also understand lots of other aspects of property and finance and investment and development. And as a broker, you can get involved at the early stages with the bridging, with the actual development, and then the long-term hold as well. And so this is some of the projects that I've done recently. Literally just finished the one in Coventry. It's two flats, two-bedroom flats, just extended it out to make it 4-bedroom flats. And it went from an income of £1,500 per month to £4,800 a month. We've got the one in Middlesbrough, which is recently finished as well. Took a 3-story building and developed it into 9 self-contained studios. Stanford Hope, this one literally just sold it and at a loss. So as much as I think this is a very profitable game that's done me well over the years, sometimes things go wrong, and it's worthwhile kind of noting that these things, there's a risk if you put yourself in a position of reward. There's going to be some inherent risk, and business is not about taking risks, it's about minimizing them. So on that one, we took a little bit of a hit. We tried to get the planning at the back, didn't quite work after 2 years of trying. So we sold it a little bit more than what we bought it for. So that wasn't that bad. But the money that we spent on the planning, obviously we lost that money. So it's recently moved to Portsmouth. So I've lived mostly in London over the last 20 something years. But in the last 18 months, I moved to the South Coast in Portsmouth. And that's where I'm having this call from today. We've got a little office here. And my in-laws live here, so I've got a young daughter, my wife. We all live here on the coast where the in-laws are for the help with the childcare. These are some of the companies I've worked for in the past. So a mix of developers, estate agents, property investment companies, national chains and lenders, and boutiques. These are the types of products that we tend to help our clients with. These are bridging, development, commercial, buy-to-let, HMOs, secured loans, portfolio acquisitions, VAT loans, and a whole bunch of more. But today, this is the focus. The focus is going to be on development finance fundamentals. So without any further delay, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the various elements to create a capital stack. So with property, it's a very cash intensive game. It's very, very capital orientated. You need to have, in my opinion, one of 3 things to be able to do an endless amount of deals. Sorry, not one of it, all 3 things to do an endless amount of deals. You need to have the deal itself. You need to be able to have the so through commercial agents, land agents, direct to vendor marketing, that sort of thing. You need to also then have the knowledge of how to add value to the site. So whether it be through planning, whether it be through construction, whether it be through legal arbitrage, there's a variety of different ways to add value through planning, through development or property. And it's important that you know how to do that, and you've got a team around you to be able to do that. The third thing is the finance. So you're going to need the capital from somewhere to be able to do that. So the knowledge, the deal itself, and the finance. If you've got all three of those things, there's an endless amount of deals that you could possibly do. So we're going to focus on the finance here. The finance, some people think that you have to do all of the money yourself, or a very large portion of it. And that's true to a certain extent. Although there are ways whereby you can minimize your equity requirement, minimize the amount of money that you need to put into the deal. And that's by structuring a senior debt, a mezzanine debt stack, a third party or preferred equity, and then the common equity, which is hopefully the slither that you need to put on top. And I've created this slide here, which should give you an idea of how this works and what the breakdown of this this particular capital stack is. So the first thing that you get is the senior debt. Now, the senior debt is typically a bank. A bank is it could be, you know, NatWest or HSBC or Metro Bank, or a challenger bank. So you've got, for example, HTB, UTB, Shawbrook, Paragon. I mean, there's Atom Bank, GB Bank. There's lots of them out there. And they will give you the first sum of money. They will give you the first portion of money towards doing the deal. And they will literally go up to 75% LTC. So that's loan to cost. And they will, or 60% LTGDV. They might go a little bit more, but typically that's a senior lender, they call it. Then you've got the mezzanine that sits on top. They will do another 10% of project costs. And then you've got the preferred equity, and then you've got the common equity, which is yours. And of course, once you sell for the full price, hopefully you meet your expectations, you'll be able to recoup all that money and some profits and pay everybody off and walk away with the prize. So when looking at the capital stack, the best way to think about this, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but ultimately there's such a thing called the waterfall. Now, the waterfall is who gets the money first, and this is how they claim priority over the money that's coming into that comes into the development. So who's putting the money out first and who's getting the money back first in a risk position. So for example, if you've got the senior lender and then the mezzanine and the preferred and the common equity as the stack is showing, if for any reason the site doesn't sell for the price that you think it's going to sell for, it sells for, let's say, 40% below the market value that you've underwritten from the get-go, then the senior debt lender is the only one that's going to get all of their money back. They'll get their money back first. So all the sales receipts that come in, they'll get paid whole, and then everybody else loses their money. So the mezzanine debt loses their money, the preferred equity loses their money, and the common equity loses their money. If on the right-hand side, if you're looking at the loan to gross development value, you've got the 60 plus 10. If you sell it for 30% below market value or below what you thought you'd sell it for, then only the preferred equity, the common equity, and of course, all your profit is wiped out. If you sell it for 75, if you sell it for 25%, then the preferred equity is, the senior debt gets their money back, the mezzanine gets their money back, the preferred equity gets their money back, and the common equity gets wiped out. Now, the common equity, so you need to make sure that you sell it for at least 80 pence on the pound, or 80% of the value that you underwrote from the outset, to at least get your money back out of it, because your money is the common equity. Your money, that's what they call the skin in the game. That's your equity that you put in, but then you get no profit. So hopefully you can sell it for 100% of the value that you've underwritten with a valuer, and that way you will get all the money back. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the returns as well. So what these people are expecting to see in terms of their target returns. So these are interest rates or interest rates and arrangement fees. So on a senior debt basis, Typically in today's market, 18 months ago, you'd probably be able to find rates as low as 4%. Not in today's market. Typically, you're going to be looking for 6 to 10%. For mezzanine debt, they're going to be charging you anywhere from 17 to 24%. And if you're taking on equity returns, they're going to be charging you 20%. So that's generally what levels they go up to, how they rank in priority. The senior debt, they take the first charge. The mezzanine debt takes a second charge, and the preferred equity doesn't necessarily usually have a charge. They can take a third charge, but they sometimes have a charge, they sometimes don't. The mezzanine debt will have and the senior debt will have a fixed return. So win, lose, or draw, you owe them their money back plus the interest, which is really, really important to bear in mind when you're taking on that kind of investor, because they're going to want their money whether you make money or not. Whereas the equity, the difference between debt and equity is that the equity you only pay back if you make money. So it's a variable return that you will only pay them back. It's a target return. It's not a guaranteed return. It does get a little bit more complex than that as well. There are things such as hurdles and minimum return metrics, etc. But for the sake of this conversation, in a generalized manner, you've got fixed returns on the debt and you've got variable returns on the equity. So another concept worth bearing in mind, which is the funding trinity. Now, the funding trinity is similar to one in the construction field that I came across that I thought would be well adapted to development finance or property finance. And that is with construction, you can't have all three at the same time, which is speed, price, and quality. So you can have something that's built really quick but cheap, but don't expect it to be really good quality. Or if you want it to be good quality, just make sure you're going to pay the right price. It's going to be an expensive build if you want that. So you always have two at the expense of the other. And it's same with property finance. So if you want speed and price, you want a good price, you've got to expect that they're not going to be very flexible. They're going to be very vanilla type funders. They're going to want to make sure that you've got a great track record, you've got a great balance sheet, the project is showing great signs of profitability, and they just can't be very flexible. If you want speed and lots of flexibility because you don't have much of a track record, or you've got some CCJs in the background, so your credit, you've got some adverse credit, but you still want the speed, yeah, we can get that sorted for you, but you're just not going to get the cheapest lender in the market. And of course, with Merryoaks, what we'd like to do is once we have the whole picture in front of us, we like to provide the certainty to be able to make sure we get the deal done for you. And there's many hoops to jump through, which we can kind of go into a little bit more detail. There's an element as well to property funding of who you know. So since 2008, I mean, before 2008, you could probably go down the high street, speak to a bank manager, give them your business plan and see whether they'd back you or fund you. Nowadays, since 2008, the market has changed significantly. There has been a whole new wave of challenger banks and funders set up to fill the hole of capital markets, which has been created by something called Basel III, where banks basically can't lend the same leverage that they used to. So now money from private debt and private equity and a whole range of other new banking licenses being issued and family offices entering the market has allowed for a whole raft of new lenders. So on looking at this page here, this is just a drop in the ocean. There's literally over 200 funders that we've got access to, and that's from development finance to bridging finance to term loans to planning investors and a whole debt through to equity. And there's probably many more than that as well. That's just 200 that we've got on our panel. So how do you know who you go to? Obviously, that's a tricky part of the puzzle. because if you go to one lender like Landbay for development finance, it's probably not going to be the right lender for you, because they like to kind of term loans and buy to lets. Whereas if you went to Pivot Finance, for example, they absolutely love development. Not great at bridging. They do some bridging, but they're not great at it. So you have to, every single lender is very, very niched, very, very bespoke in terms of what they can do and how they can service you. So having access to the marketplace is important, and knowing who you're going to go to for what, and what sort of leverage that they're going to offer, what sort of security packages that they're going to ask for, is incredibly important to know. So here's some senior debt key features. So the senior debt key features, we've got up to 65% of LTGDV, or 80% of project costs. So on the graphic, I think we're showing about 60% or so. And this 65%, it kind of floats a little bit between 75% of project costs up to 80%. But typically the max that a senior lender will go up to in any market really is about 65% LTGDV and 80% LTC. And these acronyms are super important that everybody gets familiar with. Once you're speaking with these funders, speaking their language gives them a lot of confidence that we know what they're talking about. They know what we're talking about. We're talking the same things, so that the communication back and forth becomes seamless, and they get much more comfortable when they're at the credit committee to say, yeah, we want to fund this project, we want to fund this developer. They obviously know what they're doing. So you're always looking at LTGDV, the loan to gross development value, or LTC, the loan to cost. Now the rates are from 6% up to 36 months. Typically 36 months needs to be quite a sizable site. So you're talking, 50 units plus. That's going to be maybe 18, 24 months just to build it, and then a 12 month sales period or exit period. But typically for most developments, they're going to be anywhere between 12 and 24 months. For SME property developers, the majority of the types of loans that you'll be looking at are going to be, if it's 1 or 2 houses, it'll be 6-month build, 6-month sales period, so a 12-month facility. If you're talking, let's say 9 to 20 houses, you're looking for a 12-month development loan and then a 6-month sales period, and it can stretch out to 24 months. The loan sizes typically are going to be from 100,000 right through to 100 million. The wave that I've kind of operated in as a lender, we were putting out loans of 20 and 30 million. So, I mean, but they go right up to 100 million depending on what you're looking for. Now, I've put these in a slightly different color simply because it's relevant for pretty much all of the different debt parts of the debt stack that we're going to go through. All use classes are considered. Adverse credit is considered. It's on a case-by-case basis. They're going to ask you, okay, why do you have adverse credit? Is it in the rear view mirror? Is it something in the past, or is it something that's quite fresh that's going on? They usually like it to be settled, so they don't mind if it happened in the past. But if it's something that's ongoing, that has some uncertainty to it, it's not impossible. We've got stuff like that funded. We just need to dig into the detail to make sure that we fully understand, make sure there's no personal guarantees attached to any of the liquidations that you've had in the past, that sort of thing. But we can look at those sorts of things. It's not like a residential mortgage where they don't want to touch you with a barge pole for having missed a payment here or there. Some lenders can be a bit funny, and they do ask about these things because they do want good borrowers that can pay back, and any blemish on your credit file can be detrimental. But in essence, adverse credit, that's not what they're really looking at. They're looking at you as a borrower, they're looking at you as a developer, they're looking at the project itself, they're looking at the local area, they're looking at the asset. They want to make sure that that asset can, 1, be built on time and on budget, and 2, there's going to be a market for exit. So those are the most important and main elements of focus. So stretch senior. So what's the difference between senior debt and stretch senior? So stretch senior is simply the senior debt that goes a little bit further. So it goes up to 75% of the gross development value, or 90% of the project costs. So when I was a lender, I would be doing this sort of loan. It would be up to 75% LTGDV, 90% LTC, and the rates start from 10%. I think realistically, today's market, you're probably looking at around 12, 13, 14%. And that's just on the interest rate. Then you've usually got an arrangement fee, which is 2%, and you've got an exit fee, which is 1%. So upfront, they'll take 2% and they'll roll that into the loan. At the back end of the development, once you repay the loan, they'll take a 1% fee on top as well. So that's senior, stretch senior. Then you've got mezzanine debt. So mezzanine debt, the key features are 75% LTGDV, 95% of project cost. So it's pretty much still caps out about 75% LTGDV. You can get lenders that will make credit exceptions and they can go to 76, 78, 77, 78. But typically that's where it kind of stops, but they'll stretch a little bit further than your stretch senior. Their interest rates are from 17% per annum, but then they've got chunky arrangement fees, chunky exit fees. So you're probably looking at about 25% all in. Minimum loan sizes, they'll start from smaller loan sizes and they'll go up to about 30 million on the mezzanine. Again, 36 months terms available on larger schemes. Equity. So equity, the key features, up to 80% of the gross development value. So loan to gross development value, they will go up to 80%. So they will literally fund 100% of the project cost. Because remember, you've got 80% of the gross development value, and then you should always have 20% of the project value as your profit. So I didn't make the slide here, but it's important to talk about the residual land value. It's something probably if I do this again, we can talk about residual land value. I wanted to keep it very much about the development finance, but just so that everybody's aware, there's a residual land value calculation, and that works out to be the gross development value. So the cost, the total sum of all of the units, if they were sold at market value, what would that be? Less the profit. Immediately you take off 20% of GDV as your profit. So if you're doing a 10 million pound scheme, there's 2 million of profit there. Then you take off all your build costs, you take off all your professional fees, all of your sales costs, all of your contingency, all of your finance costs, and whatever's left is your residual land value. And that's really what you should be paying for the site. So if you're doing equity, they will literally fund up to 100% of project cost. They wouldn't do 100% themselves. They'll do it in the stack. So they'll take a senior. They may take a mezz, or they might just do senior and equity, or they'll do it in the way that the infographic was showing, which is 75% LTC plus 10% LTC plus another 10% LTC and so on. But you can get up to 100% funding. Some lenders will do 100% off the bat as well. So again, you've got 200 different funders, all with slightly different appetite, all with slightly different structures. And that's where, as brokers, we obviously step in to try and decipher all of the code and bring the options to you on a plate. But ultimately, the target returns are going to be more risky because they're in the first loss position. As we said, if the project sells at 25 pence, 75 pence on the pound, that 25%, they'll lose money on that. So because they're in such a risky position, they usually charge a small premium over what a senior lender would do, where they've got much lower rates and much lower risk. Minimum loan size is 100,000, and they go up to about 30 million as well, and 36 months on those schemes. So what's the pros and the cons of high leverage? So some people think that high leverage is fantastic. Some people are very scared of it. And ultimately, the lower equity input from the developer, the higher your returns. If you put no money into the deal, you did 100% funding, and you get to make 100, 200, 300, 500,000 pounds. Your returns on your equity, on your cash that you put in the deal that you've risked, is infinite or through the roof, right? Even if you put a small slither in, if you put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of project costs, your returns are going to be phenomenal. And you are able to get into deals that you would normally consider yourself out of reach for. So that's a huge bonus. Now, the cons of high leverage are the higher finance costs. So as you can see, when you're in the senior space, 10% maybe. Once you go to mezzanine, you're starting to 17 to 24%, and you're going to be 20% plus for equity. So obviously, the higher you go, the more you're borrowing from other people, the more money you're going to be paying out. And of course, the increases of risk due to the high cost of capital. So if you've got a cost overrun, or if you've got a time overrun, and property development is rife with all of its problems along the way, lots of bumps in the road. So you've just got to make sure that you know what you're doing. Otherwise, when you're taking on more leverage, it can be quite painful if things don't work out. And people generally take on really high leverage when the market is booming, because then even if mistakes are made, the market's going up, and any kind of mistakes you've made are normally covered by the property price increases. So squeezes in the profit margin and lowers overall profit quantum. So not only does the amount of money that you would have made on the development minimize, because you're probably going to share some of it with an equity investor, they might want 50% of the profit. So you're going to make a lot smaller piece of the pie, but it also squeezes the margin as well. So if you had, let's say, a 20% on GDV margin, by the time you add in all these finance layers, you might be left with a 12-15% profit on GDV, because you've added so much finance cost in. So you've got to bear these things in mind, that your margins are going to get squeezed, the amount of money that you take home is going to be less, but your returns are going to be through the roof. So you could probably do 5 of these deals, and over those 5 deals with the leverage, you're going to actually make a lot more money. And that's the beauty of leverage. But that's not everybody's bag. And sometimes, and there's one case study that I've got where somebody just wanted lower leverage. They just didn't want the stress of it. They didn't want the hassle of it. So it's not always the right thing to do necessarily. It's about your risk profile. It's about what's important to you and how you perceive that risk. So the pros of low leverage is lower levels of risk, obviously, lower finance costs, higher profit quantums. So the more of the pie is going to be yours, right? Your overall cost of borrowing money is going to be at the 7-10%, not the 20-30%. So the money that's coming back in is going to be yours. You're going to be able to make a bigger chunk of change at the end. Now, the cons of it is you're required to put a lot more cash in, and that's the point of leverage, is that, okay, I don't have the cash, so I can go and borrow it from somebody else. But if you have the cash, then you're in a good position, and then you can do the deal yourself, and you take on less risk, you have more profit to yourself, but your returns won't necessarily be as astronomical, because you've tied up so much cash into one deal. And if you've tied up all your cash into one deal, when you see that when somebody else calls you in a commercial land agent says, hey, I've gotten this other deal, it's literally next door, it's going to be an easy one for you. You say, oh, bloody hell, I've tied up all my cash there, I can't do the next one. So there's cons as well that need to be taken into consideration. Now, of course, that's again where we come in. If you do need extra cash and you've tied up a lot of cash into one deal and there's equity there, we may be able to help release that. So what are funders looking for? This is literally, if I was to try and condense it down into the quickest, fastest, easiest way to kind of explain it, is they're looking for somebody who's experienced. They're looking for somebody who's got a balance sheet of some sort, meaning you've got some assets in the background, because inevitably property developments, they go over budget, they go over the time frame that was initially underwritten, so that they want to know that that person has the resources to be able to put their hand in their pocket and pay out for any cost overruns, because they've already committed. They've already said, these are your build costs, that's what we're giving you on day one, we don't want to give you any more money. If it goes over, that's on you. And they want to know that, okay, I've either got some buy-to-lets in the back, or I've got some Bitcoin that I've been saving up, or whatever it might be, baseball cards that you can liquidate. You can liquidate those assets, take that cash, put it into the deal, and make sure you get to the end, and then happy days. And of course, good presentation. Now, I used to be a funder. I had up an origination department that I built from scratch. I looked at over 750 deal applications in 18 months. And I only funded 10 of those in that 18-month period, on an average deal size of about 10 million. And the quality of some of these applications that were asking 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 million pounds were literally embarrassing. If you're going to ask for money from somebody, you'd hope that you'd taken some effort, some time in how you're presenting that information to make sure, one, it's got all the bits and pieces that you need in there, it's coherent, it's well presented, it's not full of spelling mistakes. It's really, really important. You don't get a second chance at a first impression. So that's where we come in again. So we take all the information that you can send us in whatever shape, color, shape, form it comes in. We try and package it up to make sure that it's very, very presentable and it has all the relevant information, so it doesn't get people's backs up before they've even had a chance to look at whether the deal's good or not. So that's really what they're looking for. And if we can tick those 3 boxes, the profitability in the project obviously has to stack up as well. But they would rather fund something with a tighter margin, with a good borrower, with a good balance sheet that's presented well, that's made an effort, than having the most profitable deal in the world with somebody that's just handed in something like they've done it on the back of a fag packet and not really taken much time and attention. It does make a big difference. And this is what they're looking for. This list is not exhaustive. This is the underwriting checklist. You're going to see a lot of this and probably more items, but there's only so much we can get on one page here. This is this exact checklist that I used to have to go through as a development finance lender, running an origination department, putting things through credit to get signed off, to make sure that they got funded. And is it exactly this on every single deal? No, every single deal is slightly different, but most of these will be on there in some way, shape, or form. So it's good to have access to this type of list, just to give you an idea of kind of when they're asking you every single question under the sun and it feels slightly intrusive, you can kind of understand, okay, we know that these questions are coming up, so don't be too surprised when they do. So what to prepare in advance of the deal. So when you're presenting a deal to a funder, what sort of things are they going to be wanting to see? So the deal appraisal, all of the elements that you'd find in evaluation packs are super important, because you're going to get a valuer out, you're going to get a quantity surveyor out, and these are professionals that will come to the deal to be able to inform the lender as to whether the project is going to be profitable through the build costs and the end value. So your valuer will tell you what's the end value. They'll tell you they'll estimate the build cost, and they'll tell you the residual land value. What's the residual land value using that calculation that we discussed earlier, which is total GDV, take away profit, take away all the project costs, and that's your residual land value. So the valuer you'll pay to go out to site and make that decision for you. Then you'll need a quantity surveyor as well. The quantity surveyor will be somebody that is they call them brick counters, because they literally count how many bricks, how many pieces of wood, how many screws you'll need, how many door handles, how many door hinges, all of that they'll count. Not necessarily literally, but that's kind of, they look at the different packages. So they look at groundworks, they look at M&E, mechanics and electrics, they look at roofing, they look at first fix, second fix, all of these different things. They'll come and estimate these packages based on what other people are building in the local area. They look at an online register called BCIS and take all of that information and make a decision based on the quotes that you've got. Hopefully you've got some quotes from local builders and contractors and subcontractors, and they will put all of that together in a report and report back to the lender and say, I think Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so can build this for that budget, or I think it's going to cost them a little bit more. I think they're a little bit ambitious, or actually, you know what, their budget's a bit meaty, really. They could probably do it for a lot less. So they'll probably question why you got such such a robust budget. And then maybe you come back with the response that, okay, we're going to be doing it to a very high standard, or with, the basement, we're digging out a basement and we just want to make sure that we've got extra contingency in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can come up with. But when we're looking through I get deal proposals regularly from a lot of developers. And what I do find is sometimes their build costs are very, very skinny. And if somebody wants to do a new build and they're doing it £80 a square foot, I almost know straight away that that's never going to get past the quantity surveyor. Even if you know all of the local guys, even if you've got materials that you can get access to because you've got some great relationships, it's just going to be too tight. So there are certain metrics that build cost per square foot for either conversions or for new build that we'd expect to see, especially if it's got basement elements, etc. So these are all the things that you'd need in an ideal world. So your existing proposed floor plan, your scope of works, the build contracts, the comparable evidence, the EPC. Hopefully, as a developer, you should be getting all this together before you even investing a penny yourself, right? This is the kind of stuff that you want to make sure that you've got to hand before you take it to a funder. And you've convinced yourself that this is a good deal. And now all you're doing is taking that information that you've compiled for yourself and you've handed it over to a funder to agree with your hypothesis. So the portfolio record. So they develop lenders love anybody that's got a property portfolio in the background. So if you've got one, they like to see that. Ultimately, other than that, though, a track record document, CV or deck, we call it a track record document, and that's simply for them to see, is this your first time? Are you a first time developer, or have you done this many times before? And they're not just looking for necessarily, are you doing this, for the first time before? If you're a contractor, for example, you've obviously delivered sites. You've obviously been on site. You've obviously understand that. If you're in construction in any way, shape, or form, if you're a building surveyor, you're supplying certain materials to trades, and you understand your way around construction, and you've been on site doing certain packages, for example, on our track record document, which I'll show you in a minute, you can put down the role that you had. So they can see, okay, he wasn't a principal developer, but he understands construction. She understands how to build and how to finish a project. And all of that goes towards building the confidence in the lender to say, yeah, you know what, I really want to back this person. I think that they're going to be able to deliver it. So that's really important. Then you've got statements of assets, liabilities, income, and expenditure. We call it a SALI. This is to show the strength of the balance sheet in the background. The credit report, Experian or Equifax, they want to just make sure that, okay, you don't necessarily need a 99999 score, but although they do help a lot. So make sure you're always, I think for any type of property finance or any type of borrowing, having a good credit score is really, really valuable. I used to think at school, getting straight A's or A stars or whatever was really important. But now as a kind of a fully fledged adult, I think that 999 credit scores are equally important. So you've got then proof of identity, proof of address, 3 months old. You'll need to get that certified by your solicitor. SA 302s or 3 months bank statements. This may or may not be needed up front, to be honest, but this might be an extra one. But the fact find form as well, with a little bit about your background and where you live and all those sorts of things. For KYC, AML, CDD, this is know your client, anti-money laundering, and client due diligence. It's just part and parcel of it, not the fun stuff, but important to have. Now, going back to development and development finance, this is one of the models that we use for looking at developments and looking at sites. So it's fairly detailed. It's something that I've built myself, having built a lending business and models. I've been able to take like huge models with funds coming from left, right, and center across many, many tabs and condense it into one page with all the absolutely key ingredients that you'll need. Now, you can build your own one, of course. That's really important that you can do that. I've got a simplified version of this as well, which helps anyone wanting to do the build, refurbish, rent, refinance, that I can share with anybody that wants access to that. I use it for my projects as well. But certainly for the more heavy duty development stuff, this is it has a little bit more detail to it. So along the left-hand side, you've got all your deal metrics. So your acquisition costs, your sales costs, your planning costs, your construction costs, your contingencies, your professional fees, your S106, your SIL payments, your profit on cost, unlevered and levered. And it just gives every detail that the lender's going to want to know within one snapshot. It's all there. Then you've got the unit stack up in the top part, which gives you the breakdown of the number of bedrooms per unit. Is it a house? Is it a flat? how many square foot NIA is it, what's the GDV per unit. So I get a lot of appraisals sent to me saying, okay, there's going to be 10 flats and it's going to be worth 5 million, for example. And I'm like, okay, is every single unit like this one 500,000? It's very rare that that works out. Usually one of them is 450, one of them is 550, one of them is 300, depending on the size, because it's a mixture of ones, twos, three beds. It doesn't usually look like no site really looks like that homogeneous style of units. Then the rental income, then the gross yield. So that's really important as well. I think a lot of people think that when you're doing development finance and when you're looking to just sell something, the rental income doesn't matter. But the lender looks at that because that's going to be your fallback position if you can refinance a lot of these properties and put them onto a buy-to-let loan if they don't sell. Because you always have to think about the worst case. Remember, it's not about taking risk, it's about minimizing risk. So they'll look at all of these different things. Importantly, the GDV per square foot. It's another really, really important metric that lenders will look at, and valuers, more importantly, will look at to make sure that your sales values are not over-egged, they're not overly optimistic and ambitious, and you can actually hit them. So if you're building something like for £1,000 a square foot in the northeast of England, for example, straight away we just know that the average price per square foot in those regions is nowhere near £1,000 a square foot. So quickly with a snapshot, you're able to tell what type of project it is and whether it's going to work or not. Then going down the middle of the table, you've got your sources and uses, which I'll go into a little more detail. You've got a little P&L, project profit and loss as well table. You've got the equity split, so the returns, how much equity is required. So we'll go into that in one of the next slides. And then on the right-hand side, some of the refinancing metrics and the LTGDV and LTC covenants of whether you're at 90% LTC or 75% LTGDV, etc. So it literally has absolutely everything. So, and sometimes I get development appraisals don't have those things. I'll always be the first person to ask to make sure that we've got all the information. This is also attached to that same, which is a cash flow forecast. It's not essential that you have this up front, but it is very, very helpful. And from time to time, I get asked for it, and I always just send over ours because it's pretty well mapped out. This is the one that we've got that we can share with everybody after the call. So if there's a bunch of stuff that we're happy to kind of share with everybody that's part of this call. And this is one of those ones which is a buy, rent, refurbish, refinance model. As I said, I've used it to grow a portfolio across the West Midlands, Kent, and the Northeast. And it really works. And it will give you bridging metrics. It'll give you refurbishment metrics. It will give you your return on capital employed. And again, lenders want to see this. They want to see that you worked out your numbers, that the project's profitable. And if it's not, like sometimes if you're doing high yielding income producing assets, you don't actually have to have much of a profit at the end in terms of the balance sheet. You could probably build the asset for the same value that it's worth at the end, but because you're getting such a great yield, which you will get in other parts of the country outside of London and the southeast, it's still a deal worth doing. And if you can demonstrate that in a well presented one snapshot, one page, it just makes the lender's job a lot easier. Having been a lender myself, I can vouch for that. Then the scope of work Gantt chart. So this is also quite important, I think, because they're always going to say, what work are you doing? Now, this is just one example. There's so many more complex versions of this as well, especially if you're doing huge, large scale development. A lot of the stuff that I do is I've just finished one, which was a couple of £100,000. But I use the same model. It's something that I built myself. And you can use it with your builders. I use this with my builders to monitor the build. Every 1 or 2 weeks, I go on site, whatever the schedule is, and I go and value how much work they've done. And then I put in each box, like 50% of the rip out's been done or 100% of the chimney removals have been done. And it'll tell me at the bottom how much money I owe them. And we agree the valuation, and then we pay them, and always pay builders on works completed, pay them in arrears. I know that some builders like money up front. It's my advice not to do that. And this sort of system will help, but also it gives the lender a breakdown of what you're trying to do, what the costs associated are, so they can see the build up of your end sum. It's great if you've got those kind of like GDV number, build cost, but they want to see it broken down. It has to be well thought out. It's kind of like, I don't know if I remember I was at school doing maths. They always say, show you working, show you working, show you working. Very similar concept. So statement of assets and liabilities. So this is a template that we can share as well. If you need, it's something that will give the lenders a snapshot of what your assets are, what your liabilities are, what your income and what your expenditure is. Very straightforward. This is the track record document that I was talking about. It's a document which you can fill out. As you can see in the middle, it says role, main contractor, developer. That's kind of a role that's a career progression that many people do. Like we're with a main contractor or subcontractor, and then developer eventually starts, going on the sheet. And then some people put it into wonderful PDFs and this, that, and the other. This is actually the easiest and the best way to present the information, because it really nicely, clearly defines what you've done, when you did it, what were the values, and what were the outcomes with the status at the end. This is the property portfolio schedule, so you can put all of the properties. If you've got a property portfolio, this really helps break down. So if you're on the Sally and you put, I own 3 million pounds worth of property, and it's not all in one property, they'll want a property portfolio schedule. So we can send you that as well. So once we've got all of this stuff, then we go to the market. That's the exciting part. We package it all up and we send it to all of the different funders. We won't go to all 200, obviously, but we do try to go to at least 10 to 25 in the first instance, depending on how complex the deal is. And then we will put together a table, which is a comparables table of lender 1, lender 2, lender 3, lender 4, lender 5, lender 6, or however many lenders there are. Usually we don't try to send you too many, because otherwise it's just more confusing than it's worthwhile. So we'll probably put the top 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and that will be broken down into the product itself, obviously development, the length of the loan, typically up to 18 months, 24 months. The GDV, so some of them might underwrite slightly different numbers. You've seen on this example here. You've got the current property value, again, that residual land value, very, very important that you should know how to make that calculation. They'll give you a gross loan amount, they'll give you a net day one amount, and then they'll give you the development tranche. So you'll always see a development terms from a lender that will be broken down into these 3 core main elements. And we'll go through that again in a future slide. But ultimately, as you can see, the LTGDV, the interest rate, this example was, I think, not too long ago. Lenders arrangement fee. So typically they charge 2% in and 1% out. And then the net loan amount you'll see, and then we sometimes calculate the total cost drawn over 12 months to determine side by side which one's the best. It's a rough rule of thumb, but it doesn't always work, because as you can see, the one on the left might be actually cheapest, but they're lending you a lot less money. So you got to take those things into consideration. Now, here are a few case studies of deals that we've done that I'd like to run through very quickly. We've got the row of garages, so very typical type of development, especially in and around cities. This one was in northeast London. Developer has found this post-auction. He's been able to secure the site. Current value of the property was 610,000. The total gross loan that we got for him was 894,000, and the net day one was 387. So he had to put in the difference, plus the net development tranche, which was 408,000. So he would get 408,000 towards the build to build these 2 houses. So just shy of 200,000 per house. Now the LTGDV was at 894,000. So if you take 894,000 divided by 1.3 million, you should get 68%. Very good. That was a 12-month loan, so nice and easy. 6 months to build them, 6 months to sell them. It was a 2% arrangement fee, and we managed to wipe off the exit fee as well. Total profit in this deal was 150,000. Now, the clever thing that we did here, which minimizes the equity requirement, is we were able to use another property that the borrower had. It was actually his primary residence, to be able to use some of the equity he had in his home to minimize the equity that he had to actually put in the deal. So although he had to put in about £250,000 to buy the property, so if you take 387 plus the 250, then it's 637. So with some stamp duty, this, that, and the other would have made the 610. He would have had to put £250,000 of cash into the deal to make it work. But because he had equity in another property, we were able to cross-collateralize, and the hard cash equity that he only had to put into the deal was about £80,000 in the end. So his return on his capital employed was actually much, much higher, again, because he'd leveraged up higher. And that's the beauty of it. So you only have to put in £80,000 of cash to make a pretty good return. So that's very typical. And this guy was a building surveyor, never really done too much development on his own. He's done some very, very, very small stuff. And this is his first 7-figure development, and he smashed it, and it's all been built as well. So actually on one of my, I'll show you where my YouTube page is, but I went on a site visit to this one. So if you watch the YouTube videos, you'll be able to see the end result of this. This is a development loan that we did in York, in the north of England. Yorkshire, beautiful place. York, one of the best cities in the country, in my opinion. Beautiful, beautiful place. And a 2.1 GDV. The current value of the property was 775. The gross loan was 1.575. We raised for them. The net day one was 600,000. We got them a 75% LTGDV loan. And it was an 18-month facility at 11%, 2% arrangement fee, and a 1% exit fee. Now, this was 12 months ago when the rates were slightly lower. So I think if you tried to do that same loan right now, you'd probably be looking at 12, 13% on the interest rate. Total profit, £250,000. These guys have just finished as well. It actually valued at more than the 2.1 as well. They absolutely smashed it because they were able to get a really good covenant on the ground floor shop. So it was a shop on the ground floor, plus the 8 holiday apartments above. This particular one was 17 apartments in Cardiff. So they were actually hotels, and they got a use class change to C3, so C1 to C3. 2 buildings. Purchase price was 1.5 million for both of them. We got a 65% loan to gross development value facility, fixed rate at 11.2% with a 2% arrangement fee, no exit fee again. The build costs were 1.2 million, GDV 3.8 million. The loan was 2.5. The net loan, no, the total loan, that's including finance, which I'm going to go on the one of the last slides and show you how that works. So you get a net day one. You get the build cost, 100% of build cost, and then you'll get the interest and finance facility at the end, which is exactly how you see it broken down here. So their equity requirement was 800,000, and this was a tight build, very, very tight, to do 17 units in 9 months and then exit in 3 months because he wants to hang on to them. He's a little bit behind schedule, I'll be honest with you. Very, very tight, great deal, great developer, great properties, but a very, very, very tight timeline to get everything done on time. This is another one that we've been working on, which was 7 flats in northeast London as well. It's actually just on the borders of Essex. 65% LTGDV. This is one where we piece together the senior and the mezzanine. And senior and mezzanine looked like this, which is a fixed rate on the senior, 10.2% plus 2.5% arrangement fee, no exit fee. The mezzanine was 15% plus 3% arrangement fee and 2% exit, so 20% all in. And the build costs were 1 million, GDV is 2.5, so good margin on the deal. The loan amount from the first lender was 1.6, and the loan amount from the second lender was 250,000. So a total of 1.85 million we managed to raise for this gentleman. The net day one for the mezz was 200,000. So they gave him 200,000, and the net day one from the senior. So 600,000 went in on day one, and he's bought the site for 750. So he's only really put in 150,000 pounds plus some other stamp duty and legal costs, etc. But there was some other equity that he's had to do as well, because we had to buy on a bridge first and then bridge the development because he bought it post auction. So the equity requirement did rise from that slightly. But this was a straightforward 12-month build, 6 months exit, and he's absolutely flying through it. And it's right next to a tube station, so it's going to fly off the shelf. Investors are already swarming around it at the moment. They want a little bit of a chunky discount, like 10%, but it might be worthwhile if it means you can get your money back, make a little bit of profit, and move on. This is a corner plot. So literally they've got planning approval to build on the garage there and extend out to the side and to the rear. And they've managed to get planning approval for 3 residential flats. So the purchase price is 862,500. These are the guys that didn't want to take on the leverage. They were like, look, I don't need to leverage up. I bought the site for a cash. They bought it for 800,000 or so, whatever it was, cash. They just didn't want to add any more cost into it. They just didn't want to borrow more money than they needed. They only really needed about £250,000 of build costs. They did want to release a little bit more funds, because those funds were going to be used as a vulture fund to be able to go and find the next deal and go and secure that. But they didn't want to leverage up to 70, 75%, 65% LTV. They just didn't have the requirement for it. So they've gone on a fairly cheap rate, 9.9 plus 2% rate fee, no exit, and they've just finished as well. This one also is on the videos that I'm doing. I think there's two site visits to this. One right at the start, one in the middle, and we're due to go back there because they've just about finished and it's on the market now. So this is what I was telling you. Okay, the numbers haven't come out as clearly as I'd like, but ultimately, this is how it's broken down. So in that big deal model that I've got, I break it down into I break it down in the middle of that table into sources and uses. So it's a tool that I use regularly to be able to know where's the money coming from and where's it going to. So the loan amount in this example, if we go back to this slide very quickly, it's £610,000, £611,000 according to this. This is very, very accurate because obviously it goes through the model. The acquisition facility, so that's the net day one amount that the lender is going to give you, is 321,000. They're going to give you always prioritize 100% of the bill costs, so it's 250,000, and then the finance facility. So if you add together acquisition, development, and finance facilities, you'll get 611. Then on the right hand side, before we go further down, you'll see what the uses of all this money is. So the total use of this money is the acquisition, the development, and then your finance cost, which is split between your arrangement fee and interest. Total use of funds, 1.224. So if you take the loan amount, if you take the total use of funds, take away the loan amount, you're left with on the left-hand side, which is the equity contribution. So that's the amount of money that you need to put into the deal. So these models that we use, whether it be the one that I'm going to give you for the BRR or the one that I use for the more complex stuff, it will always calculate what's your equity contribution, how much money do you need to put into the deal, because that's one of the 3 things that I was talking about at the beginning. If you can unlock that, then as long as you know how to build and you know how to do planning and those sorts of things, and you can find good deals at the right price, do an endless amount of deals. So do's and don'ts. Rates are changing quickly. Interest rates have been going up month on month for the last, I think, 14 months in a row. You've got to move quickly. Stress test your numbers. Always stress test your numbers. So if you think your GDV is X, always see what it would look like a little bit lower or a little bit lower than that even. You can go higher. That's the easy bit, and that's always going to put a big smile on your face. But always stress test your numbers down to see whether you are going to make a profit or not in a worst case scenario. So always put your build costs up. Always see what, if the project goes for, instead of 18 months, it goes for 24 months or 36 months. What does that do to the deal? What does that do to your profit? What does that do to the numbers? It's always important to do that. In what I do is I go for best case, middle case, and worst case scenario. And if I'm happy with those numbers and I'm happy with the worst case, then I'll aim for that medium case scenario, and hopefully the market kind of improves along the way, and we all look like geniuses. So you've got establish multiple exits as well, just in case. So if you can't sell all the units, typically we always say sale or refinance. Those are the most obvious ones. But then you've got kind of like, okay, I'm going to sell to homeowners and first-time buyers. But what happens if they're not buying at the moment because interest rates have been going up? Well, I might be able to sell to Middle Eastern or Far Eastern investors or something of that nature. So always having multiple exits in mind is prudent, and funders will ask those questions, and you almost have to have them on the tip of your tongue. Yeah, you've got to have the like you should be thinking about these things anyway. And of course, this is the sort of things that we say to funders to get them comfortable. The presentation of data, so having all of this up front rather than them having to ask you, can you send this, can you send that, can you send the other thing? They're going to ask for this stuff. They're never going to do the loan unless they really know who you are, what the deal's about, etc., etc. They want to know all the planning documents as well. If it must have planning approval, which is something that's very important. So they want to see all of that stuff, all the plans that have been approved. I've got a deal right now, actually, where the valuer has valued the non-consented scheme. There's a slight amendment, a minor amendment, where they want to put a lift in, and the valuer has valued that scheme rather than the scheme that's actually consented. Now, it's a minor amendment. It's not going to be an issue, but the lender has to only work with what's been approved. That's how they're going to work their numbers off. Preparation of the A&L, deal appraisal, track record, all of that's super important. Get organized is the most important as well. These are all absolute imperatives. Do not panic, worry, or stress out. That's my job. So here's my favorite quote to wrap things up so we can get into the Q&A session because we're running behind a little bit. Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. So choose wisely, surround yourself with good people, make sure you do your stress testing, and be as smart as Aristotle. We do 15-minute strategy calls regularly. So if you ever need anything, we're always on hand to discuss any of these. We do have access to Property People. So, well, we are the creators of Property People. And it is, oh, my screen just switched off. But yeah, Property People is a YouTube channel sharing ideas, stories, and solutions from property professionals. So these are surveyors, these are solicitors, these are developers, and a whole bunch of other people involved. So hopefully you make sure you go to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe, the bell icon, like, comment, share, all those sorts of things. There's loads of knowledge. One of the best things that I get to do is spend some time with these people, pick their brains. If you've got any questions or anyone that you'd like me to meet and kind of put a video out there as well, I'm happy to do so. And of course, on my own journey, I'm an investor, developer, landlord myself. So I'm using these products myself, and I'd like to share the journey with you. So I've created a kind of a Saam Lowni page as well, where it mixes a little bit of Merryoaks, a little bit about the investment journey of my own, as well as the Property People stuff, all into one page. So hopefully you can go and find that, look at some of the developments that we've looked at, the numbers here, and marry the two up. That's my contact details. I'm always on hand, email address, telephone number. We are also affiliates of Nimbus Maps. We get 20% off for all of our affiliates, all of our guest members, people that we're in contact with. So I've helped a few people that have access to Nimbus Maps. It's a great way to look at deals, find deals, assess deals. I use it for the GDP per square foot in an area to determine whether the end value is realistic or not. It's a very, very powerful tool. So if you want to know more about that as well, we can help out and give you a good discount. We don't make any money out of that. They asked us if we wanted to make a little bit of money. I said, no, the full discount has to go because I want to help other people benefit from property in the same way that I have. So that is the whistle-stop tour of development finance. There's so much more to it, and we could have gone into kind of what QS and the valuers are talking about and residual land values in more detail, but I just wanted to hopefully give you a good overview, and now pass it to the floor to be able to see if anyone's got any questions. If you want to type it into the chat box or Q&A section, that might be a good way of doing it. I got the chat here. Okay, here's some questions in the chat box. Okay. So, hi Sam. For HMOs, I always see people saying commercial valuation is the holy grail, but if you're operating in high value areas like London, isn't a bricks and mortar value preferred as the valuation will be more? That is actually correct. So yes, actually I moved to Southsea Portsmouth recently, and my uncle-in-law owns a property on a very nice street. It's one of the nicest streets in Southsea Portsmouth. And he's got it as an HMO, and it's a fully Article 4 here. And he's got it rented out. And the income that it produces on a commercial valuation is actually less than what a homeowner or a family would pay for it to live in the same location. So the commercial valuation holy grail, as you call it, only applies in certain areas of the country where the capital values are very, very low and the rental incomes are super high and the yield is super high. So typically where this is the most valuable is in Article 4 areas in the northeast of England, the northwest of England, and areas around Wales, and the valleys and stuff like that. Otherwise, for most parts of the country outside of those locations, the capital value, the actual end value for a homeowner, for a family, they would be willing to pay more money to live in these places than an investor would. And I literally just had a valuation, actually, interestingly, in London. A really, really good client of ours. She has got a property where she's inherited it, and she wants to convert it into an HMO. And the valuers basically told her that if you convert it into an HMO and spend over £200,000 to do the conversion and make it all super fancy and put all these en suites in, it's only going to be worth 900,000. But if you just make it into a really nice family home, it'll be worth 1 million. It's near a really good school, so families are willing to pay more money to live in that area than an investor would, because the investor's just not going to get the return, not going to see the yield, so they wouldn't pay that kind of money for it. So absolutely, commercial valuations are very, very valuable in certain areas, in certain locations, but certainly not in all. And you've got to be very careful on running those numbers to make sure. So I hope that answered that question. I'm more than happy to have a chat offline if you want to go into more detail about that, because I've being from the northeast of England and living in London, I see this quite frequently. Okay, so Rob, great webinar. What cost do senior and mezz lenders include on the LTC calculation? Q&A not working. Okay, we can use this as the better way of doing it. So what costs do senior and mezz lenders include on the LTC calculation? So typically on a senior lender, they will have their arrangement fees, they will have the interest costs, and they will have what they call loan monitoring fees. So these loan monitoring fees is where their quantity surveyor will go out across the course of the development to make sure that the project is on time and on budget. And if it's not, why not? And what are we doing to kind of problem solve along the way? Now, at the same time, that development tranche that they give you, that 250,000 or 500,000 or whatever that money is, they don't just give it to you on day one and say, go and spend it, and hopefully they'll always give you that money in arrears. So the same way that we should be paying builders in arrears, the development lender will only give you the money back once the works on site have been done. So the project monitoring is calculated up front because they say, okay, it's going to be a 12-month project in terms of construction period. They're probably going to take 12 months. They'll do an S curve actually, but they're going to kind of, take £1 million or 1.2 million, it's £100,000 a month. The quantity surveyor will come out and determine, has £100,000 been spent? And if it has, they'll give you that money back. So what they're calculating is interest, arrangement fees, and project monitoring costs. What is not included in the facility is the exit fees, because the exit fees are taken once the sales receipts come in. Once you start selling the properties or the refinance money comes in, they will take their chunk then. So they're not charging you interest on borrowing the exit fees. So that's not actually calculated into the facility, although it will be a project cost. So your model needs to take that into consideration. Now, mezzanine They don't have any project monitoring typically because they're just piggybacking off the senior lender. So they would typically just be interest and arrangement fees. And of course, the exit fee comes out at the end. So hopefully that answers that question. What costs do senior and mezz lenders include on the LTC calculation? Of course, what costs? Okay, right. So the costs need to be all the project costs. Some lenders do it slightly differently. Some lenders don't include VAT, for example, as a project cost. But what they do is they'll give you that money back at the day one amount. So it swings and roundabouts. But project costs are typically going to be your purchase costs, your stamp duty, your legal fees, your construction costs, your materials and labor, your contingency, your soft costs like your insurance premiums and collateral warranties, your the warranty provider for if you've got doing new builds and conversions, structure engineers, architect fees, all of that stuff, your stills, S106. They would usually, but some lenders will exclude, we don't fund still payments, or we don't fund, some of them have these silly little nuances. Honestly, it's a little bit annoying when you come across them. But because we've worked with most funders in the past before, we kind of know how they operate and what sorts of things they're looking for. But when I was a lender, it would literally be all project costs, absolutely everything, at least at the point of planning is approved, right? So we don't consider, like, if you spent 20, 30,000 or 100,000 pound on planning, that's happened before. So ever since planning was done to acquire the site and to start construction, those are the costs that they'll take into consideration to be in their LTC calculation. So hopefully actually that answers the question a bit better. Okay, thanks, Sam, for the presentation. Really useful. Sorry, I have to run. I'd like to catch up with you in a few days to chat about equity. We're focused on Ireland, and we also receive inbound for UK loan requests. Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you, Alan Jones. Yes, we shall catch up. Tim Hawking, thanks, Sam. I'll get in touch with you. I have an unencumbered mixed-use property, commercial ground floor and residential uppers on one freehold title. I want to refinance the property. Only commercial mortgages and higher rates are available at the moment. Would it make sense to split the title of the property so the resi aspect is on its own separate title and refinance that with a resi buy-to-let and thus cheaper rates versus commercial mortgages? The answer is potentially yes. That is potential. So when you've got so if you're doing development and you've got a wide range of different units, so it's a mixed-use freehold. So you've got maybe a shop on the ground floor, and you've got a bunch of units above. Or we've got one right now in Southeast London where it's built 7 flats, multiple units, basically multi-unit freehold block or mixed-use freehold block. If you go down the splitting of the titles, you can actually usually get a higher end value. It's somebody likened it to, when you get these multi-packs of Coke or whatever it is, like if each sold separately is slightly worth more. It's one of those things. So when you split the title, and they're all worth a little bit more if they were on an individual title. Now, the benefit of doing that is you get a higher gross development value. The cons of that is that you've got more legal fees, you've got more valuation fees, you've got more application fees. With some lenders, where they say, okay, we know what you're doing, really, we can try and consolidate it a little bit and cut those costs back a little bit to a certain extent. But the amount of money that you're saving, the amount of money you're spending on all these extra legal costs, etc., for the amount of money you're saving on the interest, you just need to do that calculation to make sure that it all kind of balances out, because it might be very close and it might not be worth it. It might just be easy to stick it on one title. I'm doing that with my 2 flats at the moment. I'm just putting it all on one title. There's no point in splitting the title for the extra cost it's gonna cause me. So that's that. So it depends is the answer. We just have to kind of break it down, and we do a lot of analysis once we do the fact find and understand the deal. So Rob, so senior ignore mezz costs, and so senior ignore mezz cost and finance. Yeah. So typically what they're looking at for the LTC, as I was saying before, all of the project costs. So actually, can I go back on this? Can I go back to the here? So you'll see acquisition costs, you'll see sales costs, you'll see construction costs, you'll see contingency, you'll see professional fees, and you'll see SIL 106. So typically all of these costs, and obviously there's a breakdown of them. So acquisition cost, stamp duty, agent fee for acquisition. They will, like, some of them don't like putting that stuff in. It depends. Some people try to pay themselves. They're like, oh, I found the deal and I'm the agent and I've got an agency that finds it. Like, well, you're just paying yourself really. And they don't like to fund those sorts of things. So it's like you're taking money out of the deal for yourself. But of course, stamp duty is to the HMRC. Your legals are pretty standard. Hopefully this part of the spreadsheet kind of answers that question for you. Hello? Oh, you can see hear me. Okay. My computer just froze. Okay, not sure why that is. I lost control of my computer. But oh, there you go. Are we back? There you go. Okay. Well, let's see. Okay. So let's go back to the here we go. That's a very good question. Will there be a recording of this evening, Sam? I had some internet issues, so missed the first 10 minutes or so. I think we can arrange that. Yes, for everybody that's been on the call, I'm happy to share this, and hopefully you can find some use with it. That's fine. What is the origin of Merryoaks name? Very good question. So Merryoaks is the name of the housing estate that I grew up in Durham. So if you go and check out number 2 Hastings Avenue, Merryoaks, Durham, DH1 3QQ, that is literally where I grew up. And that's where I realized I want to be in property. I want to be a developer. I want to be an investor. And I want to do what I'm doing today. So Merryoaks is famous, but everybody kind of knows Merryoaks in Durham City itself, especially like a lot of the friends that I grew up with. Obviously, and I grew up in there with a whole bunch of friends, and it's the kind of places that I want to recreate. I want, I want to help other people that are investing and developing across the country to build new homes, to build new housing estates, to build really nice places for people to grow up where they have dreams, where they're ambitious, where they feel at home and comfortable, and create friend circles and stuff like that. So it's kind of like it's and also the merry means happy, and oaks is kind of long lasting, I guess. So long lasting happiness. So that's where Merryoaks comes from. So that's that. Let's have a look. What else do we have here? We purchased a mixed use site for cash. All separate buildings on one title. We are going to split off the resi and the buy to let for it. We have an asbestos roof on the commercial and want to improve that building. Would a lender look at funding that 100% given we purchased the site for cash and there's no charges against it? The answer is potentially yes. I'd need to have a look at the numbers. Because they've got the covenants, they'll do up to 90% LTC and 75% LTGDV. Usually, the way it works for most sites, if you own it 100% cash and you just need the build costs, then it usually works out that it's going to be fine. Similar to the last deal that I did, that I showed, the last case study, they would be happy to provide you with 100% of the build cost, correct? Because you've put up so much security, that's your equity in the deal, which is the site itself. On a worst case scenario, they'll acquire that site, sell it in an auction at a flash fire sale, and get their money back. And that's the way that they look at things. It's a little bit crude, but it is the way that it is. So yes, if you need us to look at that, I'm more than happy to, but you shouldn't have an issue getting that funded. I'm pretty sure of that. Good. So we've got 5 minutes left of the meeting. I'm happy to share this with everyone. And there are a few other things that I said that we'd be able to send out, which is the deal calculator and I think that there's so yeah, unless you're not happy for us to send you anything, we'll assume that everybody on the call is happy for us to send these little freebies. And if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to catch up with anyone and everyone offline. I literally am obsessed with property and doing this. So if I could talk about it all day long till the cows come home. So my missus is not as happy about it as possible, but she bears with me and she entertains my my obsession. So it's good to spend an evening with some like-minded people. And if there's anything else I can possibly do, please don't hesitate to reach out.